This is Charles Bartley, and I'm taking over for today. So I am juggling admitting and getting this going. We are being recorded. We've got two speakers today. The first is Mark Bodman. He's going to be speaking on digital product management. And the second is Michelle Supper. She's going to be speaking on CSDM to ArchiMate mapping. So these are both conversations that are happening more on the enterprise architecture side of things. We've been trying to cover digital product management over the last couple of sessions from various perspectives. Last week, we talked financial. This week, we're talking more of the architecture aspect. Feel free to ask questions and comments. I will be moderating that as it goes and bringing comments forward to Mark and Michelle as needed. We'll probably have a little bit of time in each session just for general Q&A. Don't be shy. We know you guys aren't. With that, in interest of time, I'm just going to turn this over to Mark Bodman. Thank you, Mark, for being willing to present to us. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. The presentation I'm going to provide today is the same presentation I gave at a conference just last week. And some of the folks in the crowd here already saw it. So you could probably go to sleep for this portion. But basically, just to give you some background, I've been involved with the Open Group for many years on the architecture side, ArchiMate, IT for IT. And this session is to present the work that we're doing in a small group of folks, of mostly enterprise architecture, IT for IT folks, but also there's some other things coming into play here I'll talk about too. And the idea here is, how do you architect things in a digital product world? What does that mean? We're finding enterprise architects the frameworks don't necessarily cover what digital products are and how those are being organized and how that product centricity is now starting to take over. I was on a call yesterday with a company, and they're all digital products already. They operate that way, but their architects are sort of like still trying to figure things out. So this is my contact information. And you can go to LinkedIn and link me in. The work that we're doing on this publication, it's going to be a guide at the Open Group, and it will cross multiple standards portfolios. So this won't have a lot to do with specifics in ServiceNow today, but it does have a lot to do with influencing how we're going to change our data model, how we're going to change the way our products work together, and our strategy. So this is very much a work in progress, but we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We have our scope, we have our outline, we have most of our material. We just have to hone it and finish documentation. So why are we creating this guide? I kind of told you, but the main thing is that we're going to a plan, build, deliver run to this product-centric way of working with continuous product streams, continuous investments. I just saw a webinar from an Agile guy this morning, and the issue was, you could turn the development team into Agile, but how does the rest of the organization operate in an Agile way? And this has always been a challenge. And that's because at the funding level, we don't necessarily use product-centric way of thinking. We still use other ways. And then operations is really, service-centric only, which is good, but then it doesn't connect, right? Gartner published a paper not too long ago talking about their customers agonizing. I've never seen this in a Gartner publication, but they've articulated their customers are agonizing over the definition of product. And this kind of started our journey about almost 5 years ago now to define what that means. And it's because where product is used today is a little confusing. You've got products that you buy from an asset management point of view. That's a very common term there. You have products owners in agile development processes, Scrum processes. That's very common. And then, of course, customers sell products. Their product may be a service, but this is something that's very, again, common. And these are not referring to the same thing at all. You go to a different team, a different crowd. You say product. Everybody interprets it differently. They're not managed in relation to one another very well. And they are not talking about what you do manage, which are the apps and services you deliver to your customers. So this is sort of the market situation. I think some folks might have seen this slide before, but it's a good way to summarize the problem statement. And when we actually got together, we said, okay, we want to focus on products rather than projects. That's the funding vehicle. That's the entity we're going to trace through investment, through outcomes being realized. And these are going to be proactive long-term roadmaps and costs and investments and things like that that we need to track. There's a lot of organizations don't have a product mindset or PLM kind of background, so they get, this is a big shift for them. They're still operating largely out of projects. We need to also increase the formalism of what that means to be able to continuously operate. There's always a TCO aspect for a product you put out there, a digital product, and you really need to put some controls in place, like an ERP capabilities or resources. And then you have this consumer focus and lifecycle management of what you deliver to your customers. You can't just put it out there and forget it. You're going to have a continuous need to improve or take your feedback from your customers and make some improvements. So those are kind of the context. And this is another good validation of the shift. I mean, most folks probably aware of this to some degree. This is a Deloitte presentation that we refer to in our work. We got Deloitte actually participating in actually creating this body of work. And you can see really there's a interesting thing they published, which is the correlation between product owners and architects. And the question is, what does that really look like? How does that done? There's no really a guide out there that gives you a recipe on how you interact today. So this is the tee up for our guide, right? This is all just market context. And we actually debated a lot on what are we going to do here, right? We know there's a problem. How do we articulate the problem and for whom? And we came back with two basic statements, and this is really everything. As an architect, enterprise architect, what do I need to do to be effective in this new digital product world? So assuming everything has been, productized, so to speak, what does the EA do? And as a digital product manager, how do I get value from the EA activities or folks that are in the organization? So this is the meeting of two roles working in a new way and thinking about all of these problems that we just discussed. And we have to start with a common definition of digital products. And when we say digital product, what does that really mean? And so this is the definition that we published years ago within the paper. Some of the folks on the call, such as Michelle, Sue, and Stephanie, helped publish that. And this is that core definition. The thing to carry away is that you've got outcomes that require software to deliver. And that could be a robot, an API call, a human interactive device, and that software can be multiple things that are all chained together in order to work. So the generic is intentionally somewhat vague, or I would say conceptual, because it applies to so many things these days. And we can then work on breaking down, well, what is the product and who is the consumer and what is the outcome I expect? And these are just some examples that folks may recognize. And it's like I said, a broad range of types of digital products that this applies to. Everything from the app on a phone. I use my oven in my house is now digital because it connects to Wi-Fi, and I can see the outcome of my oven on my watch. It'll let me know my oven is up to temperature or the timer is done, even if I'm in another room. Modern cars have a lot of technology in them, and in order to make them go, and Tesla is a great example of that. I would say that if you've ever ridden a Tesla, it's kind of like driving an iPad. Best way to describe it. iPad with wheels. So it's quite of a different world that we're going into, and all these are examples of digital products. I'm just kind of speeding through this for the interest of time. Do we have any questions out there? I just want to take a quick pause.
Hey,
And
Ian,
Charles, I'll let you
got
filter.
Yeah, Ian, you've got a question here, I think, but I can't quite figure out the question. Maybe it's more of a comment around product management and service management having a longer background. Do you have a question here actually for Mark? Rather than me trying to rephrase you.
Oh no, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We can now, yes.
Oh, it's like flared trousers are back, Mark. I mean, we struggled for years through the ITIL era to say exactly what you're saying. And there's a mountain of heritage reference material from product management and marketing, the business. And one of the seminal books is by Richard Norman, Norman. It was the first book on service management. And it's a collector's piece, but it's exactly this. The digital part, my comment was that's just a medium, the most popular for consumption. But the whole thing was trying to, as product managers, trying to work out how to manage this new era, type of product, a service, which had more human touch in those days.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so, tracking the IT for IT stuff. I mean, yeah, this is all coming into focus, but I think we need a rider to persuade or to help people really go back to basics, which is IT. When I ran a data center, was a service provider. And if you could get the people to realize that, then you can play the customer sat game and the value game. But, those words didn't mean much until you could sort of put things in place that enable people to understand what that meant, IT as a service provider.
Yes, yes. And I mean, I think the building blocks are there. We're just trying to put it back together in this guide for a very specific role in that interaction. How do I operate now? Assuming this is your new way of doing work.
And just one last comment, and I'm hogging it a bit, but we actually got some success with just taking one product stroke service at a time rather than the whole organization, and saying to people, you can leave the rest as is. Let's take something. And that's where we positioned that service management office that acted as a virtual decision-making machine as to either passive, oh, you want me to make this into more of a service or a product? Let's look at it. Or active, we'll go target something. And we had some success, but we needed that little organizational core, a couple of people who part-time knew how to do this, knew how the system could help, and then just roll out one example. Because even rolling a service out when you've got an existing support center is extremely, you've moved a lot of cheese.
Absolutely. And part of, so hold on, I think we'll address some of those things in this guide. The intent is to bring some of the know-how and suggested course of action into this guide. Okay, so really what we're doing in this body of work is bringing together the IT for IT standard. You mentioned that before I did, which was great, nice lead in. TOGAF, which is a common, very popular enterprise architecture framework, and a number of other things like OAA, DPBOK, Team of Teams, things that also are available within the open group or common way of structuring your organization to do these things. There's still some challenges, but there's a lot of, I would say, referenced material we're incorporating. And if you're not familiar with IT for IT, this is kind of a high-level view of what this is. And don't have enough to get into this as a course. You could take a course from some of our partners. This is digital product focus. The first thing to note is that digital product in the lower left-hand side, this orange dot, is the new core, the new entity that to focus on. Everything else comes from that. And so that's our new core. There's 7 value streams now in IT for IT version 3. Evaluate is the first one, which gets it's your feedback loop, either from internal or the market. Explore is exploring investment options for each digital product or product portfolio. Integrate is when continuous integration, think about that. You're actually building new versions you may or may not release and deploy. Continuous release, continuous deploy, which again, CI/CD sort of world, and then continuous operations. And so these are the 7 value streams that now make up the core of IT for IT. And these value streams are continuously, operating, and whatever pace is whatever pace makes sense. Evaluation is more or less at your funding level. Operate is break fix day to day. Functional components are also a big part of this, not displayed on this particular diagram, but there's quite a few. As you drill into this, there's a lot more meat and a lot more detail. And of course, there is a data object element of the IT for IT standard, which describes things that we are related to these orange dots, but these are the things like test plans, requirements, scope agreements, value streams is now a core element, and even architecture blueprints. We'll get to some of that in a minute.
We do have
The other
another
thing-
question there that might fit in with where you're at. And could you please give an example of a digital product that is not a business service in the sense of CSDM?
Yeah, it might be easier to articulate that here. So if you own the infrastructure services, and I'll just use this as a diagram to illustrate this, this would be considered a foundational digital product. And a lot of folks would call this a shared IT service, but you're providing a service for internal consumption. Other teams would take your IT service and build upon it or rely on it, depending on where you are in the OSI stack, from the network services, all storage, all the way up to app services, and even virtualization. If you get to that level, but those are building blocks in the EA vernacular. But these are digital products unto themselves, and they form certain relationships that build teams, for example, would consume. And the red relationships that are articulated here are what's usually lost in a normal organization. The full life cycle of whatever I delivered to you as a consumer on a build team are typically lost. When you look at a CMDB, for example, it's hard to put that together. You have to look at the CMDB and the CI structures to kind of reverse engineer how these relationships really work. There's a level of formality that needs to be inserted here to make this work well. If not, you might be outsourced. You might turn, your on-premise data center team might become doing something else, and you're outsourced to cloud. Now, your product lines are another example. Products that we sell, we are a digital product company. Everything we sell is digital, and our product lines are organized around how we deliver those to our customers. We also have business capabilities in which we automate the work employees do. And the way the employees work, we have HR for HR systems, for HR departments, finance systems for the finance departments, and so on and so forth. And then we have the last one is the tool chains. So the very fact that we have something called Build Tools One, it's our own, factory to pump out new versions of our software to customers and everything in between. So the build teams for shared services have a way of upgrading the shared service stuff, independent from everything else. But every digital product has its own factory, its own, everything from ideation process through delivering and managing their customers. So there's an IT for IT component that underpins everything. So this is not new. This is basically already documented for the most part in the IT for IT standard. The only thing that's new to this particular diagram is the addition of this factory area. And there is an open item to add this component to the standard. Actually, we met on that last week. And so you'll see this probably appear in a update of the standard itself in the next year or so. Okay, so this is just a very high level depiction. Hopefully the example helps, but everybody has to think about what they deliver as a digital product. There's also, a guide that we're going to incorporate things like governance models. How do you assess these capabilities? The DevOps. How do you operate DevOps at scale? Some of those contexts. This is a good way of using IT for IT. And integration, a lot of folks have started there. As a matter of fact, largely why IT for IT was created is to understand that tool chain, right? How does each tool in the IT ecosystem connect in order to deliver something to somebody? But we're getting a little bit more now finite about that something to somebody bit. And then, of course, the digital product-centric operating model. We do have another publication we came out with earlier in this year and the last year on digital product centric operating models, and that would probably go through a revision in the next year or so. As Justin Mann, one of our co-authors, is now at IBM and probably able to interact with us again. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And if you look at the digital product and personas, the key thing is, how do EAs get involved? So assuming you're product centric, everybody's doing their thing, they know who their consumers are, internal, external, etc. How do EAs now interact in shaping this and helping these product managers make decisions, or executives figure out, where do I shift the funding? Does the foundational team need more funding? Are we going to outsource that? Are we going to outsource our product value streams in our factories? That all has a big impact to the folks and the products that you're selling or dealing with internally. And one of the things in the guide that we're tackling is this element. This is, again, another part of the IT for IT structure. You can go read about it. And these are the specific elements that are now part of the IT for IT structure and the evaluate value stream, where you look at the governance and look at proposed investments. And then, of course, how do they work with the digital product portfolio? This is sort of the meat of what we're looking at. And there's 4 scenarios that you go through in this particular evaluate value stream. I don't want to turn this into an educational a session on IT for IT, but you got to consider your funding and where does a new digital product go? What portfolio? Is this a customer specific thing, employee specific thing, or is this something more foundational? And I'm just going to use an example internally. So we sell a product called asset management, and in that asset management, we have a feature called normalization that normalizes the name of a product when we discover it. Well, it is embedded in asset management today, and we're looking at taking that portion out and making it part of the platform, because other teams are creating these products, these product models that represent third party or internal products, and the normalization process is not common. And as a result, this is a discussion we're having to say, we need to take this feature out of this product, move it into a common capability. So these decisions, affect what you're going to do downstream and how you fund activity or refactor products. About TOGAF. So another big component of this guide is incorporating TOGAF. And it looks like from a time check, we've only got about 3 minutes, so I'm going to be very, very fast. And this is the TOGAF framework. If you're not familiar with this, this is the ADM, and you basically work around what we call crop circle to develop requirements. These are all the deliverables that you would have in a architecture. And I'm going to skip a few slides just in the interest of time. And what we want to do is say, okay, if architects operate in this way and you're creating views and managing requirements in this way, what if these requirements were about the digital product portfolio and products? So again, top down, broad stroke. If I'm using this architecture framework and I'm trying to shape what's going on in this context, how do I now express the product line architecture vision for what we sell? And we have to think about the impacts to customers. Do I have common components, or do I segment the product lines in a certain way? What's the vision for that architecturally? And then we also need a vision for the employee experience. Are you going to focus on a few platforms? Are you going to outsource HR or finance, right? All these things impact your decisions. Likewise, the vision for shared services. Is it going to be in-source, outsource, combination? Are you going to go to clouds and platforms, and everybody basically builds on platforms? That's what we do. Our products are all built on our platform. And then last but not least is product value streams. Is how do I do CI/CD at scale? Does everybody use the same tools? Or do we let everybody do their own thing? And there's risks in, of course, doing that. You want to make, Six Sigma improvements for the factories. So this is just a quick example of the breakdown of the information that we're actually looking at creating and also providing in this guidance. And I'm probably at time. The only other thing that I'll cover just in a single slide is that we're also looking at organizational concerns. And I'll just put this slide in there just to kind of give you an idea. But when you're small as a single team, it's easy. But as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, you're dealing with team of teams, and you're dealing with problems such as cognitive load. You don't want people sitting in meetings learning about what they need to do. You want to get them, tasks and get them off to doing things. So we're incorporating some guidance on how we can help organize things based on these digital products and how you can scale at different tiers. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. The meat of the guide will come, and there's a lot of material that we are bringing into this guide, shuffling around and creating some meaty bits on how to use these existing standards, practices, and ways of working. And that's all I think I have time for.
There were a couple other questions, but I think we've more or less got them in that. I thank you, Mark. No, that was quick. We're going to turn it over to Michelle now and look at CSDM and ArchiMate.
Thank you. And thank you, Mark, for keeping to time. And let's bring some slides up. Here we go. Okay, good. Everyone can see that, I hope?
Yep.
Good. All right, so welcome to Mapping CSDM4 to ArchiMate. So this is me. A lot of you know me, a lot of you seen me before. 15 years enterprise architecture experience and lots of systems architecture experience. I have also been working with the Open Group now for the best part of 15 years. Before I joined ServiceNow, I was actually a forum director at the Open Group looking after 3 different forums. So I've got quite a history with them and their standards. I've contributed to, I think, 2 books, 8 standards, several guides, white papers, many blog articles, lots and lots of things. And I'm now the Enterprise Architecture Advisor across EMEA for ServiceNow. So that is who I am. What we're going to talk about in the next 20 minutes. I'm going to introduce you to the white paper, talk about what is a CSDM, why it's useful, just a little brief introduction to ArchiMate for those who aren't aware of it, and then the mapping that I've made between these 2 things. Then we'll look at how you use that, so how to automate your enterprise architecture capability within your organization, and how to use the Now platform with enterprise architecture tools, and then we'll close a circle. And then after that, I will give you some bonus items if you stay with me to the end. So, right, so I wrote a white paper, and this in this white paper I've mapped the CSDM4 to ArchiMate. Which you can download the white paper using that QR code that you can see on screen. So the mapping that I've done is a mapping of CSDM4, but I've included within that some extra elements, and all of those pieces, so the bits of the CSDM plus those extra elements, are translated into the ArchiMate notation within the model. Essentially, what this white paper will give you is a meta model, which you can use to produce a TOGAF ArchiMate based architecture that will be supported by the Now platform CSDM. So definitions of all the different elements in the extended model within the paper are provided in a table at the end. So please do go ahead and download that paper. CSDM4 is described in the white paper by Scott Lem and Mark Bodman, my co-presenters today, and that is also referenced in the white paper. So what is a CSDM? The CSDM model is shown here on the screen, and it describes the most commonly used elements in the ServiceNow CMDB, which is a configuration management database, the sort of the brain, if you like, of the Now platform where the data is stored. It's important to remember that there are many more elements held in the data tables on the Now platform which can be accessed through the CMDB. So don't feel that you have to be limited to the data objects that are shown in the CSDM diagram here. It doesn't limit you. It's just these are the most common ones. So why is CSDM useful? when a company's data architecture is usefully aligned to the CSDM and hence to the wider CMDB, it's going to be far easier to design processes that make best use of the platform. It's essentially in the language that the platform speaks. So it's good to align to it. This makes it possible to reuse and master data on the platform, and it makes it easier to flow data through the platform without obstruction. So you can share data between different packages within the platform itself, like this. So making that alignment to CSDM, it makes it easier to integrate data sources to the platform, to share data more efficiently within the platform, and also by mapping the enterprise architecture meta models. If you have one within your organization, if you have an enterprise architecture meta model, if you align that with the CSDM, you can take full advantage of integration apps that exist between the different enterprise architecture repository tools and the Now platform. So this allows data to pass directly from the CMDB to your enterprise architecture tool, and that can be used then to automatically populate your enterprise architecture repository. And that alone saves an enormous amount of time in data gathering if you're collecting information about your as-is situation, your current state. So that enables the enterprise architecture team that you'll have to focus on more valuable tasks like modeling your enterprise and doing analysis and strategic planning and thinking for the future. So yes, this is how we're going to use the Now platform to automate your enterprise architecture. So what is ArchiMate? The way I like to think of it, ArchiMate is to TOGAF as maths is to physics. So I'm an astrophysicist by training. And so maths is the language that we use to describe what we see in the physical world, and ArchiMate is the language that you use to describe enterprise architecture. ArchiMate is a non-proprietary enterprise architecture notation, is commonly paired with TOGAF, which is also an architecture standard, and both ArchiMate and TOGAF are trademark standards of the Open Group. Their specifications can both be downloaded from the Open Group library if you have access to that. ArchiMate itself is a visual language, so it uses shapes and symbols and connectors to represent the different building blocks and relationships within an enterprise architecture. So ArchiMate is a very convenient source for definitions. So if you are struggling to find a definition for a particular type of thing, like a business service, say, have a look in the ArchiMate standard. The writing team did an excellent job, and if you ever want to check any definition of any architecture element or stereotype, I recommend that you consult the ArchiMate specification. It really is very good indeed. So the mapping itself, mapping CSDM to ArchiMate, how did I do that? Well, first I mapped the objects in the CSDM to the best matching ArchiMate stereotypes. Okay, so the obvious things. Then I added some objects that aren't explicitly named within the CSDM4. So some of these objects I've added align to tables within the Now platform that can be used for data integration purposes. Some of the elements I've added would not typically be found on the Now platform at all, but instead you might create them as part of a transformation program or as part of an enterprise's business architecture. So things that you might not find on the Now platform that you would include in a project, maybe drivers, the reasons why you want to make a change. These elements together, all of them, serve to connect the objects from the IT and data layers that are the primary concern of the Now platform with the objects from the motivation and business layers that will define the unique character and purpose of the organization being modeled or of the transformation that you're trying to do. So when used together, the objects in the CSDM4 and that extended meta model help to align the layers of your enterprise architecture, particularly during digital transformation. And that ensures that the IT elements that you're putting in are going to serve the business needs, which fundamentally is what you want your architecture to do. So after that, I connected the elements logically, and then defined them using both the definitions listed in the CSDM white paper and also the ArchiMate specification. Yes, Thomas?
That wasn't me. Did somebody have a question? I think somebody's not muted. I'll mute them.
Thomas, you need to mute. Okay, you'll find a full list of all the definitions and some examples of these things and naming conventions and things within the white paper, so please do download it. Finally, when I've written the whole paper, I submitted it for peer review. So peer review and comment from Scott Lem, from Mark Bodman, and also Mark Lankhorst, who's over at BizDesign. So Scott and Mark are the leading authorities on the CSDM here at ServiceNow, so all CSDM questions to Mark, please. Mark Lankhorst is the key developer of ArchiMate, so full authority on this paper. And here is the model. And yes, I do know it's probably too small to read on your screen. Again, please download the white paper. The QR code is there, and that way you'll be able to see it in detail. The mapping can be used in its entirety as a meta model within your enterprise architecture, if you want to do that, or you could use parts of it to supplement or extend your current meta model. If your organization already has a meta model or specific definitions that it has adopted, or if it has different elements in its meta model, then feel free to adapt the material to fit your needs. Okay, so this is all very flexible. Don't take this as gospel truth. You can tailor this to your own requirements. So, why is this useful? Well, you can automate your enterprise architecture capability using tool integrations. So, the BizDesign integration app, so the app that goes between the CMDB and the BizDesign architecture repository, is actually based on my mapping that you just saw. But other tools have got integrations into our CMDB, and there is a tool, Inspire, that actually sits within the CMDB. Just remember, when you are doing this, so I'm up to, yeah. So sorry, there's several enterprise architecture tools that can map into ArchiMate language. So if you're looking for external EA tools that can map into the CMDB, BizDesign, LeanIX, RDoc, Sparks, MegaHopex are all tools which can integrate with CMDB. There might be others available. If there are, please let me know in the chat. I can't keep up the number of tools that keep trying to integrate with us now. Inspire is a tool which actually sits native to the platform, sits within the CMDB, so you don't need an external integration app to do that, and it will take data live straight from the platform itself. If you're using any of these tools, you can download the integration apps, most of them from the ServiceNow App Store. Most of those are free as well. Just remember, when you're doing your definitions, each object in the CSDM is defined, and those definitions span the Now product portfolio and the Now platform. So as a result, the closer your organization's data model is to the CSDM, the easier it's going to be to manage your data if you're using ServiceNow. So if you're going to maintain your repository using an integrated EA tool and using that to upgrade, then do please try and keep your definitions as close as possible to the official ones. And that's going to make it possible to maintain your instance more easily and will make it easy to do upgrades in the future as well. So very briefly, if you're not familiar with some of the modules on the Now platform, I'm just going to show you this because I'm about to show you a diagram which was going to use some of these abbreviations. These are some of the different packages available to sit on the Now platform. So we have the CMDB there. There's also these other elements here, these other packages. So ITAM, SAM, and HAM, all the asset management type stuff. You've got ITSM for service management and operations management, it's ITOM, and digital portfolio management there, DPM. So if we take all of these, we can put them all together like this. So if you're planning to bring all of this material together on the Now platform and use it to manage your enterprise architecture as well, this is the kind of pattern that you might be interested in using. We often see customers pairing the ServiceNow APM with the enterprise architecture tool, using APM to monitor day-to-day running of the IT landscape, and the EA tool to map out the strategic vision for how the landscape is going to evolve, and also how to align the business to the IT layers. So both APM and the enterprise architecture tool are going to rely on the CMDB, and you can enhance the data that's in the CMDB by feeding it with different feeds from different Now products or from integrations to external sources. So if you're looking at this diagram, you can see that here we have some different packages along the bottom of the diagram which feed into the CMDB. Every time you add in an extra package, you're adding a facet of data, a different dimension. And that helps to enrich the data in the CMDB, which then allows more data to go to your EA tool and also to the APM to give you more insight. So I'm not saying that all of these are essential. You can choose any combination. But of these, the ones I would say were absolutely essential if you wanted to do this, I'd certainly recommend Discovery and Service Mapping from ITOM. That's going to populate your service catalog and your application catalog, and that will really help you with your enterprise architecture. Everything else is a wonderful thing to have. So if you want to know more about your technology portfolio management, lifecycle of data and so on, use the asset management stuff, ITAM, SAM, and HAM. That will give you really good insight into all those elements, and it ties in well with ITOM. IRM will help you to include things like risk. So if you are concerned with risk and compliance and governance within your organization, IRM is a good thing to add there. If you're wanting to use your enterprise architecture for strategic road mapping, add in SPM. And if you are looking to do DevOps, perhaps, and coordinate all the development, put in ITSM, DevOps, and DPM. So some of these tools have got two-way integration. So some tools have a one-way, and they just take data from the CMDB into the EA tool, and then you can map them and create models. Some have two-way, which enable you to make decisions from your enterprise architecture models and then pass them back in to be actioned into the Now platform itself. And that's very, very powerful. So you can make a decision and then pass it back into DPM. And yeah, let's say you want to retire an application, you can send that in and then it can go and be done in real life. So that's a very useful thing to be able to do. To give you some indication of what that looks like.
Michelle, one more comment on that last slide, if you could go back. One thing I like about how she laid this out here, and where ArchiMate and CSDM to me are really complementary, is as an enterprise architect, a portion of my job is exploratory creative design. I'm understanding business. I'm coming up with 15, 20 options of what I can do. I love doing that in a dedicated EA tool set. I love doing that in ArchiMate. Very rich, expressive tools and environments for doing that. Some of those options, maybe one or two of those 15 things I explored, I'm going to go forward into production as digital products, tying this to Mark's session earlier. Those are things I want to introduce as potential new items that I want to get funding for, and they become part of the application portfolio. And that's that line connecting to CMDB, and that connects to what Mark was showing earlier. So I love having both of those and having those talk to one another. The things I want to go forward from EA, I can turn into business app records right there in the CMDB. I can tie my design documents to those, but I still have that freedom of exploration in my EA tool set. Mark also had a LinkedIn post a couple of weeks ago talking about EA tools and your operational data, like, do you connect those or not? I'll try and get a link for that, Mark, if you've got it and can put it in the comment. That would be helpful.
Yeah,
Back to you.
I'll place that. Yeah.
Thanks, Charles. So if you are creating this, so let's say you've got these elements within your Now platform and you're pushing that into your enterprise architecture repository, how could you use that as an enterprise architect? So I've put together this table, and you're going to have these slides later, so you'll get an idea. Think of this like recipes. So the basics that you have if you had APM and CMDB, that would give you the CMDB content, and it'll push things out, or just CMDB, or push content out into your enterprise architecture tool. You can create your as-is and to-be views. Okay, and you can, if you need to have extra data, you can bring that in from other tools, or you can put it in manually if needed. If you add in any of these extra pieces to this first line, then you can get additional views. So, for example, you could populate your application inventory, So with the item discovery, you get all your applications and the relationships between them. With that, you can make your application landscape, the application portfolio catalog, communication diagram, and so on. So, this is how you build your enterprise architecture very quickly. And again, it saves so much time. You don't have to walk around your organization and find all this data. It's in the Now platform, so use that to give you the information that you need. It's a massive shortcut, and it means that a huge efficiency saving in how you're going to build and maintain the constancy of your enterprise architecture. Part of this as well, please note that the models that I've suggested you make here are all very simple. Sometimes I see customers trying to make vastly complicated diagrams. So they take, they'll model things out in ArchiMate, and you'll look at a diagram, it has 20 different kinds of artifact on it. It's all these different stereotypes, everything's lined up, all these different kinds of relationships. The problem with a very complicated diagram is no one knows how to read it. So if you have diagrams, please keep them as simple as possible. Keep maybe 1, 2, 3 types of object on there, very simple relationships, and that will really help you to see the trends and enable you and others to make decisions from those diagrams. And it also means that you can create the diagrams quickly. So the data that you're going to have pouring in is going to be different. It's going to be a different cadence to how it used to be. Some organizations, it used to be that you'd spend 6 months gathering data and creating models, and then spend the next 6 months updating them. And that would be your year's cadence for enterprise architecture. What we're suggesting here is that you can use the Now platform to update on a daily basis your enterprise architecture and to maintain those views. You don't want overcomplicated diagrams. So keep things as simple as possible, and that keeps your architecture really live and vital, so you can make strategic decisions straight from it. So, closing the circle.
There's a quick question here before you get there. Can you discuss report outs of the architecture that support business conversations? And maybe that's part of what closing the circle is.
Yes, I will. Can I answer that right at the end? Because I've got one more slide.
Go for it. Go for it.
So I can just make a quick note. Right, so closing the circle. So the CSDM to ArchiMate mapping is bridging the gap. It's going to help you to bridge that gap between the Now platform and enterprise architecture. It's helping you to map the data from the CMDB consistently within your enterprise architecture artifacts. So using the platform to update the enterprise architecture repository, it's going to take away a lot of the manual data gathering effort, while also enabling the current state architecture to reflect a near real-time view of your enterprise landscape. And of course, the wonderful thing about doing this is it's going to, if you use the platform in this way, if you map into ArchiMate and then into enterprise architecture, you're elevating the use of the Now platform. You're taking it from being an excellent operational platform that manages your business and all the operations that are happening there. It's taken it from that to the next level. It's going to become a key strategic asset, one that can help to build your architecture, to coordinate transformation, to give visibility of your landscape, and help you to make key strategic decisions about the future of your enterprise. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you some free resources. So get your phones out and take your QR codes, and here's some free stuff for you. And while you're doing that, I'll answer the question. So what views can you create to support business conversations? Right, so there are the things that you want to support business conversations tend to be the less technical diagrams. So you leave the application diagrams to one side and your data flows, that's not so useful. The things that I find help most in the business level are value stream analysis and business capability mapping. So what you're looking for is diagrams which are as simple as possible and which describe the business and try and make it as efficient as possible. Your business capability map will show exactly what your business is able to do. If you can create value streams from that, So end-to-end value stream, this is what our business does. It's higher up than a process. If you're looking to do a transformation, I always recommend that people do value stream analysis, because it means that you can do a transformation while isolating a core part of, just within a core part of your business and leaving everything else undisturbed. So HR, for example, if you're doing onboarding, rather than looking across the business and saying, we're going to look for all the low-hanging fruit and start taking out all the applications that we don't need anymore and basically causing disruption across the whole landscape, you can say we're going to just look at onboarding and we're going to look at that whole value stream end to end. And that means that the rest of the organization can continue undisturbed while you look at that one value stream where you map which business capabilities are using, are contributing each of those steps, which teams contribute, what the processes are, which applications you currently have. And then you can say which parts of the Now platform could be used to do this instead. How could we automate across the Now platform for that entire end-to-end value stream? And then you can do a full rationalization across that and move everything cleanly. You can set up that full automated value stream and then transfer when it's ready to go. So that's the kind of view I find most useful for business when you're showing exactly how the technology and the changes you're recommending are going to affect the business straight off, and simple diagrams with as fewer connections as possible. Any other questions?
I don't think I'm really seeing one. That's another question here from the comment. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them out loud now. If not, we'll wrap up and close.
I have one. And thank you for that. That was an excellent presentation. So when you're talking about application families versus applications, how are you linking those within the CMDB, and how are you linking those within ArchiMate? I'll give you an example. So if we have an application portfolio of Epic or Microsoft, and we want to label an application family where we can kind of pull these, kind of group them all together underneath one umbrella, but link them to the individual applications that are being represented in the environment. How would you do that internally to the CMDB, and how would you do that within ArchiMate?
So how would you connect together different applications within ArchiMate? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, in terms of product families.
So I think what you're describing is an application landscape diagram. You would identify the applications within your landscape. So let's say if you know them, then fine. If you don't, then you can do discovery, which will gather those, and then you can push them from the CMDB into an enterprise architecture tool. And then it's a question of how do you want to map those? So if you want to map them by function, you could do that. So it might be all the things that do security, all the things that do pick a function. You can gather them that way and just list them within those boxes. That's a good way of doing it. Or you can show how they connect together and the information that flows between them. That would be an application communication diagram. Both of them are TOGAF views, but very easy to draw out in ArchiMate. You just use an application object to describe your application and an information flow relationship between the objects if you wanted to show the communication.
Another one that I do a lot is applications to capabilities to see where you have duplication and redundancy in your environment.
But I think the question is illustrating one of the points the article was created to kind of make, which is there may not be 100% symmetry in the model used in ArchiMate and CSDM. There's going to have to be some assumptions or some gray area. You know, a family in ServiceNow APM could be multiple things in the ArchiMate language. There is no direct mapping. It's not. It doesn't say family in both sides. So there is some openness for interpretation, and depending on your use cases. And you know, I think Michelle, you went through like 3 or 4 different options for that. So that is where some of the integration challenges would occur as you start mapping these between different frameworks and trying to integrate the tools that use them.
Great. And then one final one is, can you give me a good example or definition for an application?
No. So everybody has a different definition of what an application is. So sometimes, you know, the only thing I can suggest is look up the ArchiMate definition or the definition in the white paper. They'll line up. People define applications differently, and it can. So yeah, you can have an application that can just be a piece of software that gets used by users. Very simple definition. But then there's other things that could exist in there as well. So some people might describe a macro as an application. Some people might, have an Excel spreadsheet that they use as a shortcut to get data from one thing to another. Now, is just that spreadsheet now counted as an application? It can vary, and my recommendation would. And also there's system software. So there's some software that you don't actually access separately, but it's there to support larger pieces of software, and it's essential to have it there. So it comes down to how you want to manage this stuff. It comes down to your decision as an enterprise architect. So the best thing I can suggest is that you put together your meta model of your organization and you define what you want your different levels of application to be. Bear in mind as well that some tools will might charge you differently depending on what you define as an application. So be strategic in what you define as an application and what you want to manage as an application, and what you might want to manage as system software separately.
So we're at time, and this question could go on. We could have had a full session on different parts and shapes of application and how it maps into CSDM and how it maps into ArchiMate. So I think we'll take that offline and consider possibly deeper dives on that for the future. Once again, thank you for coming. This is recorded. The recording and the presenters' presentations will be available on the Digital Services Forum. As per always, thank you, everybody. Want to give back time. Thank you. Thank you to our presenters.